Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. I was admittedly very nervous, but you all look really nice. So I'm here today to talk to you about a project I just started. With the support of National Geographic, over the coming months, I will be following the individual stories of 3 to 5 expectant mothers who are arriving at the southern border of the United States as migrants. My interest in this project started in 2018 when I was assigned to cover the mass migration event now infamously known as the caravans. In the spring of 2018, approximately 1,200 people, the majority from Central America, formed a caravan to move through Mexico to the southern border of the US. Excuse me. Caravans are nothing new. There are documented caravans that have moved through Mexico since at least 2010, and it's a safety in numbers thing. Mexico is rife with regions that are hostile to migrants, and so this is just a way to attempt to ensure a safer passage through the country. Unfortunately, this caravan caught the attention of US President Donald Trump, and with that came the attention of the media, myself included. I met with this caravan at 3 different points through Mexico, each time, of course, meeting new people, but also reconnecting with folks that I had met at earlier points. I had covered migration stories before, but this was really the first time that I had had the opportunity to watch people's journeys unfold in real time. I was making photos for daily stories and creating work I was incredibly proud of, but I was also starting to long for a deeper understanding of the individual experiences that these folks were having. I was also working at the border more and more, and in that I was sort of passively receiving a crash course in asylum and immigration law and the way that it's changing under the US's current administration. Now, there are 2 policies in particular that I want to mention, and those are metering and migrant protection protocols. Now, it's a little dark out there, but just by a quick show of hands, when I say metering, how many of you know what I'm talking about? Okay, and what about migrant protection protocols? Okay, actually, admittedly, that's a little bit better than I was anticipating. So metering, very quickly, is a delayment strategy that's being employed by Customs and Border Protection. Usually, asylum seekers are accepted when they are presented at the port of entry. But with metering, CBP is implementing a quota system, only taking, if they take anybody at all, on a given day, between 15 and 30 people. This is creating a major backlog of people waiting to present themselves to officials simply to start their asylum process. And then Migrant Protection Protocols is a program that is forcing asylum seekers to stay in Mexico while they go through their asylum proceedings in the US. Now, asylum proceedings can take months or years, and these are months or years that asylum seekers are spending in border towns, which are some of the most dangerous in Mexico. These programs are controversial because of the danger in these border towns. There have already been documented kidnappings, murders, assaults, and extortions of asylum seekers who are under these US programs. As I spent time with my family and non-journalist friends, I was seeing the really strong reactions to the family separation policy, zero tolerance policy of summer 2018, but folks weren't reacting to things like MPP with the same gravity. And this brings me to my current project. When I started this current project, one of the first people that I reached out to was Jimena Rojas. Jimena is a midwife. She's part of the Parteras Fronterizas, or the border midwives of Tijuana. I actually did a really quick story about them in 2017, where I spent the week tagging along with Jimena as she bounced around Tijuana, providing free pre- or postnatal care to any migrant women who needed it. This is one of the most poignant moments I spent with her. This is Cheryl. She's from Honduras, and she's hearing her baby's heartbeat for the first time in the backseat of Jimena's Subaru. Jimena's role as a midwife who cares for migrant women has kept her on the front lines as policies become increasingly more hostile to all migrants, but particularly to vulnerable populations like pregnant women. A perfect example of this A perfect example of this is at the end of 2017, the current administration very quietly ended an Obama-era directive to not detain pregnant women unless under extreme circumstances. So according to a recent US Government Accountability Office report, detention of pregnant women has gone up 52% under the current administration. But all of that can be really hard to grasp because Entities such as CBP and ICE, as well as the sheer volume of policy changes that are being enacted literally almost daily, if you don't have the time to spend with individuals, it's kind of impossible to understand how they're being impacted. So with that, I want to introduce you guys to two of the women who are taking part in this project with me. I'm going to ask the folks in the audience not take any photos or videos of the coming images that are up on the screen. And guys, we're good in the back? Great, thank you. So this is Karen. In these images, she's around 37 weeks pregnant. She and her 4-year-old daughter and her husband arrived in Tijuana in July. Karen has spent a life running. She's from Honduras, and her father was murdered there some years ago. She's since lived in El Salvador and Nicaragua, looking for a home free of violence. I assumed, perhaps foolishly when I met her, that Karen would be trying for asylum in the US. So I was super surprised when she told me, no, mi sueño no es Estados Unidos. My dream is not the US. After years of running, Karen had found the potential for stability in Tijuana. Her husband got a job at a recycling center. They're living at a shelter where people are kind to them. They're sharing a room with 32 other people, but there is a potential for peace and calm that she's found in Tijuana that she hasn't seen anywhere else. She's also seen what happens to folks who try to cross to the US. Detained, sometimes separated from their children, and sometimes deported back to the place that they're running from. She doesn't want that. When we talk about her future, her focus is always on wanting her girls to be able to study anything that they want and study as much as they can. She wants to be able to support them as they follow their dreams. I left Tijuana just before Christmas, and on December 23rd, I sent Karen a text just to ask how she was doing, and I received this in return. Her new baby girl was born just before the holidays. At first, I wasn't sure if Karen belonged in this project. She is not an asylum seeker, but in understanding Karen not wanting to pursue asylum in the US, to me it says just as much about the system that she wants exactly nothing to do with it. And this is Sandra. Sandra and her daughter were a part of the approximately 56,000 asylum seekers who are a part of the Migrant Protection Protocols program. I met her at 4 a.m. for the first time, standing in the pouring rain at the gates to the United States. A Customs and Border Protection officer had just told her that her court date had been rescheduled for the afternoon hearing, so she should come back at 9:30 a.m., 5 hours from then. There is nowhere to sit in the pedestrian walkway between the two countries. It was pouring rain. She was miles away from her shelter with no money for a cab. Everything she and her daughter owned were in a rolling suitcase that was already soaked. And she was 39 weeks pregnant. My friend and fixer Jorge Nieto quickly offered his car as a place for all of us to go seek shelter from the rain. Admittedly, we all took a nap. Close to 9:30, the four of us, Sandra, her 5-year-old, myself, and Jorge, walked back with her to the gate to the United States. Sandra was fleeing domestic violence. She and her daughter are both from Honduras. She's been in Tijuana since August. And this was not the first time that Sandra and her daughter had presented themselves at the border. 2 times prior, she and her daughter had presented themselves to officials and ended up in what's known as the hielera, or the icebox. This is a CBP holding facility that is infamous for its low temperatures, bright lights, and Mylar blankets. Luckily, this morning, CBP called her name promptly, and I watched her cross to the US side. I assumed she would be boarding a bus to go to the San Diego Immigration Court, where I would be waiting to watch her hearing. When I arrived in San Diego, I saw everybody who had been standing in line with Sandra, but I didn't see her. I saw her name posted on the wall, so I knew she was supposed to be there. And I waited in the courtroom for hours, watching all the other hearings, but she never showed. I sent her a few texts that remained unanswered, and I had to go back to Tijuana and continue working, all the while wondering what had happened to my friends. Nearly a week later, I received this message. Sandra's baby had been born in San Diego. It turns out that that rainy morning, CBP had separated Sandra and her daughter and placed them in the hielera for a 3rd time, this time causing them to miss their moment in front of an immigration judge, causing them to miss their court date. While Sandra was detained in the hielera, she went into labor, and luckily she was taken to a hospital where her baby was born happy and healthy. A teeny tiny silver lining of this is that Sandra and her little family have been taken out of MPP and allowed to go live with a cousin in the US. Her court case is being transferred to her new state, and she will remain there through the remainder of her asylum proceedings, and hopefully, through as long as she wants to. The theme of this year's Storytelling Summit is storytelling can make an impact, and I hope that this story impacts large-scale decisions like the way people decide to vote, and also small-scale decisions like choosing to support individuals like Jimena, the midwife, who are really lonely players working to provide some level of comfort and humanity to folks who have entire systems set up against them. I can't anticipate what this project is going to look like at the conclusion. I'm going to Matamoros next to see if I can find any more women who are interested in participating in the project with me, as well as to continue to follow Sandra and Karen. The only thing I can say right now is I am so incredibly grateful to these women who are allowing me to follow them on this complex and sometimes terrifying journey. Thank you, guys.